Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the I'll Be Watching You event, in which the Arachnaean Watcher is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as the troop, it comes in with brown-purple arcanes, and that's about the only useful thing that is related to this thing. It ends up gaining a bunch of life boosted by webbed enemies for 6 additional HP per webbed enemy, for a total of 24 if they were all happen to be webbed. It also gives all other allies 1/4 of their mana. So this is going to be pretty bad. Every single one of the troops have been gaining basically this quarter mana mechanic. They've been lacking really good board control to synergize with that, making it pretty redundant, since a board control option that also accumulates a little bit of mana would be much better, since it has extra turn potential, whereas this has absolutely none of that. That and stat boosting troops in general, particularly when just like an HP or armor, especially just to itself, tends to be very, very bad, and this just continues that tradition of adding these very bad troops to the game. But now, the Zhul'kari has it. One thing that this might actually do, though, which is really annoying, is make Zhul'kari a little bit harder to actually kill out due to its overall durability. Simply because Zhul'kari tends to have a lot of troops that have a overall high attack but low durability. While there are still a few exceptions like Giant Spider, this might make it the delves there, depending on the teams that you're doing, or not delves, but the explorer that you do there, depending on what you're doing, a little bit harder. But overall, it's basically useless. It does have 40% scar reduction, and it does have that one Dark Elf trait, but nothing really too special here, nothing really unique, and nothing that you'd bother using this troop for. So it is basically just for upgrading Zhul'kari to 12 star, because you can reach 12 star this week, and that is basically it. There's no other real purpose to it. So things this week, for one, we could be getting version 5.0. That is very unlikely though, but if it is to happen, it is to happen today. And if it doesn't happen today, we basically have confirmation that it is happening next Tuesday, which is probably the more likely time. However, it is theoretically possible that it happens today. So I still have my hopes up for it, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, the new mythic of Lord of Slaughter, one of the best mythics currently in the game, is still available in the Glory Gem Guild and VIP chest. If you get any keys throughout the week, you might want to consider opening for it. You have until the end of Thursday all the way at Friday reset time. So you basically have 2 full days and a little bit of hours to still go and try to attempt to get it if you have not yet to get it in keys. So do make sure to get on that if you are still interested in him and have some keys laying around. Other than that, we have 10% to all Zhul'kari, as well as 10% to all elves, which has a lot of overlap, given that almost the entirety of the kingdom will end up having a 20% bonus. This also includes the Orb Weaver hero class, since it does count as both of those two categories of Zhul'kari and as a elf. So we'll be able to get that. And as normal, using this troop is completely useless for its 40 souls. You might as well just use a proper soul farming team, especially since this troop isn't going to help you in any way, shape, or form. It's just a dead slot. So I would completely ignore the 40 souls that you can gain from using this, and just wait till a better option comes around, as well as a better resource. As far as event keys, they are questionable on if they are worth using. If we go check underneath troops and go under Zhul'kari, which is the Kingdom of the Week, of course, we can end up seeing all the drops. And of course, if you don't have everything, click Show All, and it'll end up showing everything that is available here. The main thing to really notice that is in drop table, well, there's 2 main things if you're going to bother opening keys. There's Web Spinner, which is the easier to obtain one. It is a legend. If you still don't have Web Spinner, really good to consider it, especially if you can't get this most recent mythic. This is going to be a good alternative to the most recent mythic if you happen to have not gotten it. It doesn't have skull spam attached to it, but it does get to do triple damage to poisoned and webbed enemies. This was updated a little over a year back to also do to webbed, which is very broken because it also has snare, which is web. So basically, if the enemy does not have immune to web, it will hit triple damage on everything in the game while also having web on top of that, which is a pretty rare used mechanic, which Web Spinner actually gets to do pretty consistently. Doesn't have it off its ability, just has poison, but it does get to do it a lot off of skull if they don't just instantly die anyways. They have really insanely high skull damage and used in a lot of teams, so definitely worth considering. At least open event keys to try to get this if you don't currently have Web Spinner. Highly advised to go max that out. It is an insanely good troop at any point within the game. Other than that, the only other thing that's really worth trying to go for, though it is rather rare, given that it is the mythic of this kingdom, is Arachnaean Weaver. It also has 20% this week. It gets to web all enemies, which is the most consistent webber in the entire game currently. It also gets to deal a bunch of true damage to the last 2 enemies, and if the enemy dies, it gets to explode a bunch of gems. It's used very commonly with Orb Weaver in Guild Wars. However, it can also be used in pretty much any true damage team in the game, and also gets to explode pretty much like a Golgotha if it happens to get a kill on top top of having web, on top of having true damage. It also has an insanely good trait setup, honestly probably one of the best trait setups in the entire game, or among one of them. It has stealthy, so it can't be directly targeted, as impervious, so a bunch of immunities, and it has a 75% chance to summon a web spinner when an enemy dies, which is actually the strongest trait summon in the entire game, given that, as I mentioned, web spinner is one of the better troops in the game, having its triple damage on skull to basically everything, almost everything. So very, very strong two options, though the Arachnaean Weaver will be much harder to obtain. But if you don't have a web spinner, I would definitely advise using some event keys to the point of having a web spinner. And if you don't have all of them, I'm not sure if I even bought mine yet this week, but don't forget you can get 10 event keys pretty much for free every single week. They're 180 per event key, but you can buy 10 for 1,800 glory. Among a few other resources. It is generally advised to always do this, especially if you are low on event keys and need a bit more. You also get a couple maps, a little bit of gold, and a little bit of souls along the way. However, just the event keys alone are worth the entirety of how much you spend. So definitely worth considering going for it if you are in need of event keys. It's 10 limit per week, but definitely worth considering. I can't not take tributes. And then let's go over to the Tower of Doom. So, Tower of Doom this week. We have Purple Tower of Doom. You may have noticed we had Tower of Doom 2 weeks ago. This is mostly because they are trying to align the Tower of Doom to the next event that's going to be occurring very soon with the new campaigns coming in 5.0. However, let's go and just run a battle real quick. So here's a little bit more of an expensive team. If you want to lower it down a little bit, you can replace Zuul'Goth with a different skull spammer, for example, Divine Shpala. But we're basically running a Mang team is what I decided to go with for this purple, using just a mana accumulation option. Leprechaun, of course, being very good for mana accumulation, and Thrall ends up doing quite similar. So right here, we're going to throw a Mang down. Probably going to go down the line just to make sure if we take a skull right here, it will be enough to kill. So for example, if I so choose, which I probably will because he's about to get mana drain, and we have enchant anyways, I'll throw the skull and that will kill him out. We can then just go take all of our mana. We have Mang again, though I think I will not go for it. I don't know, let's see. Is that enough damage? Yes, even with Enrage and everything, that should be fine. Let me actually do it on that because if it's armored, since we might lose Enrage here. So we'll go for Thrall since we have all of his mana. That gives us Zuul'Goth. I will then kill out his first slot since he can't instant kill the Doom. However, you can stack up a bunch of skull damage and kill it out. Unfortunately, gosh, that was a pretty hefty miss right there. Let's take a skull for now. He'll skull us back. Might need a safety brown, or then again, that's enough damage, so we just kill it out. But yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do. And if you find you're dying a lot, switch to either Sentinel hero class, and definitely at least use Titan and keep taking Browns, as that will give you barrier every single time, which will help you tank it out. Also, if you find you're dying to death mark at all due to pacing of the team, you do have the option of using Orpheus medals, set 2 or 3 of them, and you'll be able to cleanse off the death marks ideally before they end up killing you out. And that's basically all you have to do for the higher levels of Tower of Doom. Pretty straightforward. As normal, Mang can kind of kill through it. It has a really good mana accumulation and skull spams that can synergize with it. Purple does have some of the most skull spams of any color in the game, so ends up working out pretty well. One other thing to really mention just real quick, of course, is we are still getting weapons through this. We still don't know if we're going to be getting another batch of weapons. There's a good chance we won't, due to the fact that Tower of Doom will only be once every 11 weeks starting next patch. So these might be the last lines of Tower of Doom weapons. However, I am still holding off on upgrading them. However, if you were to upgrade them, this is basically the second best type of weapon to upgrade. Either this or the one that does like the scatter damage with the skull creation. However, the absolute best, of course, is the one that does the full AoE with Doom skull creation. That is always first priority for upgrading the first color of every single one of the Doom weapons. So if you have any of the scrolls and you haven't put them in anything, the ones that do full AoE damage into Doom skull convert are the ones that you want to go and upgrade first, as they are highest priority. But this is second or third priority as far as how the Doom weapons are currently balanced. These get to do heavy splash damage. They have a little bit of extra effects on top of it. They also get to counter out the color pretty well, since they get to stun the enemies of the color or do some kind of effect, and they also get to cleanse all allies of the similar color, which will at minimum do itself, since it also covers that color, and also gains a little bit more of a benefit when used against Dooms. It has a normal 4 explosion, but also gets to do 3 additional if there is a Doom in play. Obviously, this is very, very rare. However, it helps with Tower of Doom, if nothing else. Overall, you wouldn't really need to use this weapon for the event, and I would definitely advise getting the Doomed Scythe up before you'd bother getting up the Doomed Ram. But that's pretty much the weapon. Going to be very situational if you're ever really going to bother using it, but it might find its way into stuff into the future, especially once we get confirmation that no more weapons are occurring, which is very likely the case. However, I don't believe we've had anything that would 100% say so. Anyways, today we got ourselves the Faction Assault of Amithrax, which is a pretty straightforward one. It's where Truffle became added to the game, and you can literally use as all the standard Truffle teams that exist. We're getting a Spider tomorrow, which I believe is Zhul'kari bonus, if I'm not mistaken. And that spider model, gosh, we've had that spider model for years, and they're finally adding it into the game, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's the one. But we're finally getting that spider. Thursday, we're going to be getting the Orb Weaver hero class, which I guess technically is another spider, has 20% stats this week. It's very rarely used, however, it is insanely good with a life and death on your defend team for Guild Wars. That is pretty much the entirety of Orb Weaver. You don't tend to use it too much outside of that instance, just because it's not the quickest of teams that you tend to use with it. However, it is very safe. And the AI normally uses it correctly, oddly enough, so it's a really strong defend team. Definitely worth getting it upgraded. I believe it only needs level 70 to be effective. You really need to a minimum have 40 because you need stealthy on it. Really important to have stealthy with Orb Weaver if you're running with life and death or similar. If you don't have life and death, you actually can do an alternative with one of the weapons that exists this week. So if you happen to not have life and death, there actually is an alternative that is viable in Soulforge right now. However, for the most part, you are going to want to use life and death when using Orb Weaver, ideally in second slot, as that tends to be where it goes, so you can get the giant spider summon in front of it, since it has a 35% chance to summon a giant spider whenever it ends up taking damage. Ends up working out pretty well. And you also have that effect simply from having it traded, which is nice, but you definitely need at least level 40 on it to have stealthy. And if you don't have that, you might want to get it before next Guild War, either by getting a little bit of Class XP through that, or just manually farming it. Other than that, Bounty Hunter, we have this Friday, and not sure if we're going to be getting another troop. If it was kind of weird, because it looked like we were going to get an event for Parrot, which is one that we already had, so I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with that. Might be a little bit weird because of the patch or something, not sure, but I'm not sure if we're going to have a Parrot event or if we're actually going to be getting something new, but we'll find out on Bounty Hunter Day to see what ends up happening there. Other than that, for Soulforge, we're going to be having ourselves pretty much only one thing worth crafting, and that is Sacarax. One pretty noteworthy thing to note about this is the first time Sacarax has been in the Soulforge since his release. So if you want to go pick up a Sacarax, this is the first time you've been able to do so, specifically in the Soulforge. So if you're still missing him, definitely a good time to pick him up. The current mythic that's in the drop table too will hopefully be available in about a month, 2 months in Soulforge as well. So of course you always can pick these things up at a later time with diamonds. However, it generally is a little bit more efficient to get them with keys if you can on their week that they come out. But anyways, this is pretty much just like the trolls, except with a really high mana cost and the ability to target any color. You're normally going to be targeting either green, blue, or brown and centering an entire team basically around that color. I've tried it for Guild Wars. I do find it to be a little bit slow. He can be half mana started on Blue Day though, because of elemental overlap with Mirage Queen. However, there is no really Mystic synergy at the moment that ends up working for it, unfortunately. And as far as traits, it does have a nice Impervious. However, the other trait that it has kind of doesn't really get to do much more often. All elemental allies gain 1 attack and armor at the start of each turn. This troop is kind of premised around the fact of spamming extra turns. So the fact that it gets an effect that ends up applying whenever you don't get an extra turn is pretty bad. This thing would actually be probably one of the better mythics in the entire game if it had a effect that would trigger every single time on an extra turn. It's still a pretty good mythic, however, I feel like it's a really big missed opportunity. It doesn't have something attached to that final trait that really could have made it very nice. It's mostly used for HP boost ratio, oddly enough, other than for mana accumulation. This can work pretty well if you're going to be using a team that specifically needs that boost ratio. One of the best current things right now is green and brown. If you synergize it specifically with Ketris, not only does it have double mana color overlap and still one additional color that you'll be able to go get simply by taking it, which will go directly to it, but they also have the HP synergy, since it gets a 2-to-1 boost ratio for its damage for every single HP. So anything that ever gets a really good HP boost ratio off a green, blue, brown are the main things you want to look out for generally for Sacarax synergy. That and anything that has a really good extra turn ability that might be able to utilize like an infinite mana loop with it. Mistralis is one thing that can kind of be decent with it. However, overall, and Truffle as well. But overall, I feel like it's rather average, slightly above average in the current state of the game, but still worth considering. Anyways, skip on Scorpius is probably not going to be relevant next patch, so just skip on it. And everything else is pretty bad unless you specifically need it for the Kingdom upgrade. Skady is normally replaced with Jar of Eyes. I would say Jar of Eyes is better than in almost every instance, so it's not normally worth going out of your way for, unless you really wanted to incorporate it into like Blue Guild War or something. Anyways, we got a lot of weapons. One thing to note about these weapons, though, is the only one that is available right now, or for today, is Tome of Spores. If you want to get this, you have until the end of today to go and get it. It is associated with the faction event. You can either get it through gems through the faction event, or you can get it within the Soul Forge, but only for today. So definitely make sure to go pick it up if you do want to go get it, as it will not be available for months upon months upon months until we get another Amithrax faction event. And yeah, it's only available directly for today and will not be available tomorrow or at any other points during this week, unlike all the other weapons. So if you want to pick it up, do so. However, it is a really useless weapon that you would only ever really use for completionist purposes. So if you still need it for completionist purposes and you're at the point where you're trying to get those weapons for that sake, there it is. But other than that, it is useless. And pretty much every weapon here. The only one that you might want to go out of your way for is this book. This was the one I was mentioning that is basically a life and death replacement. No, it is not better than life and death. However, in the kind of teams that it gets used in, it has a bit of decent synergy. So if you don't have life and death, you can kind of use it in an Orb Weaver team as a replacement until you do end up getting life and death. But it deals damage to an enemy boosted by elf allies, and then creates a mix of green and purple, which ends up working out really good with like a Orb Weaver with a Arachnaean Weaver kind of combination kind of elf team. And yeah, it's okay. It's not the best of options for it, but it is definitely a option. Also, as time goes on, this will probably become more effective as we get more elf synergies. Obviously, we got a pretty bad elf synergy with the new elf troop today. However, we could get new elf mythics or something else that might end up making this book very, very viable into the near future, especially given that Orb Weaver is already a pretty solid hero class. So that also has a capability of creating even more purple. So yeah, it is highly, highly advised if you're going to craft any weapon this week to get a Book of Brambles if you're looking sheerly for the sake of how strong it is. Other than that, if you want to buy Doomed Rammed in the Soul Forge, you can. However, I would advise just getting it for 500 gems via the event, which will also end up helping out your guild. However, if you so choose to craft it, it is slightly cheaper to craft it this week than it is to craft it any other week. However, I would advise just spending 500 gems for it through Tower of Doom instead, as that is much more resource efficient. Other than that, we have ourselves the Doomed Potions, one of the past Doomed items. It's pretty useless. You can pretty much just ignore it. And other than that, we got Dark Shot, which is also similarly useless and is pretty much never going to be used, just due to the fact of how unviable it is to really get it working in the current state of game. Potentially, we could have a good Weber that would work really good with it into the future. But as it currently stands, every team that currently runs like a 4x kind of web to try to make this weapon works is rather clunky and is generally not worth using. So it's a weapon that is pretty much ignored, especially with its mana cost. It can be a little pricey at 14 compared to like a 12 or a 10 mana cost kind of mana generator. And other than that, we also have Dark Staff, a weapon that is also extremely useless. However, it is one of the cheaper ones, and if you're getting it for completionist purposes, could make for another weapon to go and upgrade Zhul'kari with if you end up needing it. So definitely a lot of weapons this week, that's for sure. 6 available today and 5 available for the rest of the week. So you definitely don't have a lack of special weapons to go and get. And Sycorax would be the mythic if you're looking for the mythic. Anyways, let's just go over some teams. One of which I already mentioned because of the Tower of Doom already. But here is the quick kill for the lower level range. You can end up doing Mountain Crusher Thrall or the Arachnaean Weaver into Leprechaun for the purple restriction. Ends up working out pretty well, and it is in drop table right now, and it has 20% bonus. So if there was any week to use Arachnaean Weaver, now is the time. So you can end up using this. I forget exactly where it falls off, and it depends slightly on your stats, but I believe around 12 or so it ends up falling off, 10 to 12, somewhere around there. So at that point, you'd want to switch into a Mang or some kind of Skull Spam team or something else in general. However, up to about 10 to 12, depending on your stats, it will be able to go in one shot, and it does have 20% additional damage, so that allows it to go a little bit further than it normally would be able to on a normal week. So worth considering since it has a little bit of a buff this week. Other than that, this was the team that we're just kind of using. It was Mang into a Skull Spam. Again, if you don't have Zuul'Goth, you can go a different Skull Spam there. A couple options include like Divine Ishbala or Keeper of Souls or pretty much anything that can Skull Spam consistently there that uses purple. The choice really just depends on how you want to play out the battle. But yeah, you just want to use a Skull Spammer there. And Zuul'Goth just happens to be one of the better options, but you can use pretty much any Skull Spammer in the game and just mana generate heavily off of Thrall, Leprechaun, and just get stacked up Mang, keep taking Brown so you gain Barrier. And if you find you're dying too much, switch to Sentinel hero class if you have it upgraded, which will be a bit tankier than Titan, but slightly slower. Other than that, for Doom, for super cheap, if you don't have much to use and you need something that will upscale throughout the event, you can end up using Mang with pretty much just a bunch of mana accumulation. So this is a somewhat similar premise. We're using a Fist of Zorn, which is a bit of a cheaper scroll spam. If you don't have Fist of Zorn, you can try going Skeleton. It won't work as good, but it's the cheapest thing that you can go for since Skeleton is a common. So it's a little bit cheaper than going an Epic that doesn't have a Kingdom that you can get it from. However, it does have Empower into the yellow Skull Convert, so it gets to convert out all yellows to skulls, which is a color you don't even use, and then gets to gain some free attack to your first slot, so it ends up working out pretty well. And you have Empower, so you do get to do that immediately. Azura you get from free from completing out the Melantis questline if you haven't already done so already. It has Dispel, so if you get rid of their effects, you also get a bunch of mana accumulation from it, and a small stat reduction. However, it is used mostly for its mana accumulation and the Dispel that it has. And Leprechaun just uses the standard mana accumulation to get your mana going. And Mang's used in the exact same way. You tear them apart, you gain their armor into your attack, and then you get to do insanely high damage. You take Brown so you don't die, and again, if you happen to have Sentinel upgraded, which is a little bit less likely earlier in the game compared to Titan, but Titan's definitely the first priority of the two. But you can end up going Sentinel for a tankier option if you so already have it upgraded. Otherwise, I would just stick with Titan. You do need to get Titan at least to level 40, so you can barrier every Brown if you don't already. Ends up working out pretty well. And yeah, that's everything for that. As far as the Delves, this is the Amethyrax faction, so you can use literally all the Truffle teams, which if there is any time to show Truffles, it is now. So you can run Truffle the entire time. It is quite literally where he resides from. The restriction is of green and brown, so you are able to use this team. You don't have to use Doomed Glaive. You can end up using a Cleanse there. You can end up using a different Skull Spam, but I have found that it ends up working out best with Doomed Glaive if you do happen to have it as a option. I believe it's also available very soon in Soulforge. Obviously, that won't help you now. However, I believe it's in Soulforge in a week or two, so do keep an eye out for Doomed Glaive and Soulforge. Start saving those greens if you haven't already, because it should be around the corner if you are still missing it. So really good pickup. Honestly, out of all the Doom weapons, it is arguably the strongest one in the game. Simply because, well, it's already the strongest type, but it also has Entangle attached to it, and it also has a Storm into itself. It is the only one of the Doom weapons that are like that have both of those two useful storms, mana into itself as well as the Entangle. So obviously Entangle doesn't fully stop Doom's Storm, but Doom Skulls. However, it's still a really good reduction nonetheless to be able to lower down their damage, and in a skull-oriented teams end up working out pretty good, as well as just a disable in general. And other than that, Pure Faction is very weird in that you literally just use Truffle because it's the only extremely relevant thing from the entire kingdom or the entire faction. The basic premise for running a Truffle team, especially with Enchant, is you end up getting the first 2 Truffles to full mana. If you were running it not during this event, you would go 3 Truffles. However, during an event, you can go 2 Truffles. You can use the Enchant to get the other 2 to full, and basically just try looping it off of that. And yeah, if you have a couple Truffles, they tend to loop for quite a bit of time, even into themselves. So even though it doesn't seem like you have much diversity between the enchant that you get from the potion effect, as well as the fact that once you get 2 or 3 of them up, they can kind of just keep looping into themselves, is pretty much enough to infinite every single battle. And combined with whatever extra potion damage you might have from the event, you're also going to be dealing somewhere around like 70 plus, if not higher, damage per cast, which will help chip them down quite a bit quicker. So you're not going to be at this low number of damage. It'll be quite a bit higher than that with the potion effects associated to it. But overall, should be a pretty straightforward factions. With potions, it's one of the easier ones in the entire game. However, you can still kind of get clipped up a little bit just because you're literally only using 2 colors. So if you get really bad luck for a long duration, and you have to wait on enchant the entire time, it could backfire a little. However, more often than not, you should be able to get some mana, and worst comes to worst, you'll have full mana after 9 turns when your enchant ends up giving it to you. So at worst, it'll take 9 turns to get the team rolling, and as long as you don't die within 9 turns, it should pretty much be an auto win once it gets rolling. And lastly, Orb Weaver class event we have this Thursday. There's a couple different ways you could run this. This one just shows one that's slightly cheaper. It's Black Manacle into Tyree into Double Dark Maiden. Tyree you get for free from completing out the Zhul'kari Kingdom if you haven't already. Black Mantles you get for free at around level 150 or so from upgrading a Brown and Purple Mastery. And Dark Maiden is a rare, so it should be pretty easy to end up building out. You do want to have first trait on Dark Maiden, so you get that extra green, which will allow Tyree to ideally 1 turn. If you end up getting a Surge on green, that will be able to 1 turn her to full mana. You then go and cast that into either brown or purple, get Black Manacle up, keep spamming Black Manacle, rinse and repeat. You also have a convert of yellow into whatever you want, so make sure not to destroy yellow if you can, and this will allow you to convert it into either brown or purple, ideally purple, but either or will end up working out. And yeah, just keep spamming Black Manacles until you win, and should be a pretty straightforward class event. Not one of the easier ones, but if you're just doing the free battles, definitely shouldn't be that hard to end up going through for the most part. Anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. But yeah, 5.0 around the corner. While it is very unlikely at this point that's probably going to come out today, it is almost, or it pretty much is guaranteed that it'll be next Tuesday. So if it's not out by the next few hours, look forward to it next Tuesday, which is pretty much a confirmation at this point that it will be next Tuesday if it's not out by now or out by soon. So we'll have that to look forward to. It's going to be bringing in campaigns. It's going to be bringing in some free loot that we can do throughout the week, as well as some objectives and some extra stats. These extra stats will help quite a bit with delves. And of course, we'll be going over everything when it does end up releasing. But anyways, guys, I'll catch you later. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.